I got my debate against him that he lost. That was funny.
You should isolate that if you haven't already.
It is. It is. It was just a debate with him.
Oh, cool.
I don't do like Discord stuff. Or did you mean the one from last
Yeah,
week or whatever? Yeah, no, I have like an actual debate with him from ages ago.
That's good. So what we'll be doing, I got a list of questions that I want to ask you. Some of them are the questions I asked everybody, and then some of them are specialized for you. I just like knowing some fun questions about people, right? And so it just, there's a couple dumb ones, but it's just stuff I want to know, like for my own knowledge, right? Stuff I've never asked you. So and then we'll do the AMA immediately after. So that should take 20 minutes or so, and then we'll do an AMA after. And the stages are totally broken right now on like half the cell phones, so I have to do this stupid room. It's going to be very hard for me to manage the people in queue and whatnot, but basically I have to have them DM me, so it's going to be slow with the AMA portion, so I apologize for that ahead of time.
Sounds good.
Because we could do a stage, but half the people aren't going to be able to listen in, right?
That makes sense. Oh, what I could do. I just ordered some bike cleats for my recumbent. Hopefully make me go faster. I'm down to 215. I've got another 30 pounds to go.
Oh, nice.
I'm going to get my 6-pack and update my Tinder profile.
That's good.
Start my career in porn.
Yeah, I hit up I hit up P-Mars. Although I think P-Mars only knows gay directors, or for gay porn. The AMA will last however long T-Jump allows us to ask them questions. They're usually like an hour and 15 minutes, something like that.
30 seconds.
We ask the first question and he leaves.
Yep. Those are cool.
I'm going to spam channels. Once this starts, like I said, in the AMA question, it's going to suck. So I just know it's going to suck in the AMA question until I figure out how to manage this.
Sounds like it will be great for views.
It shouldn't be too bad. I know what I need to do. I just haven't done it like this before.
Well, I just mean the more dumpster fire, the more good for views.
Oh, right. I'm trying to provide a mix of dumpster fire and nuggets of wisdom. I think that's important.
Kerry Walker says he likes that very much. Frank's been going to the gym every day. I've been biking. I got a job doing bike delivery at Jimmy John's. I've been trying the strategy of like anything I want to do, get a job to do it. So I want to learn how to like be a structural engineer for a building so I can know what buildings are garbage and a waste of money. So I just started emailing companies like, hey, you got an internship or something where I can go help these guys and they can teach me what to do? Because I don't want a degree. I don't want to pay for a degree. That'd be stupid. Congratulations, Frank. It's a good progress last year at psychology. When are we starting? Can we just start now?
Did you say you're ready to get started?
Yeah.
All right.
Facebook Marketplace. Let's see if there's any cool junk.
I need like 30 seconds on my end.
All
I
right.
just got to get set up. Or I've been setting up. But
28, 27, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Okay, you counted a little quick.
It's a lie. I don't need that. Dexcom G6 transmitter. What is that? Diabetes management. That doesn't help me. I need iPads. I need like 10 iPads, inexpensive ones. That's stupid expensive. I need like $25 a iPad.
All right. You ready?
Yep. I was born
Sorry, I had
with
to get now. I don't have the ability to do announcements anymore, so I had to make a message for that. It's going to start off kind of slow, and then after they do the announcement, it should pick up. These channels are kind of weird. So we'll just give it a minute to build, see if anybody pops in. Now, with this, anybody in the audience, we will have to mute and unmute to get you to have the ability to ask questions later, so we'll cover that later. I do appreciate you. I do appreciate you being here today, T-Jump, for this AMA. As I said, it should start to populate as we're in here talking. Now, I've known you for a while now. We've been doing the Theist Helpline for a couple of years now, and it's just always awesome listening to you. Even your YouTube videos are always so insightful. And so I just wanted to ask you some questions about you. You're an interesting person to me, you know. Now, the first thing that I think we should go over is just telling the audience about yourself. What do you think the audience should know about T-Jump?
I like potatoes.
You like potatoes.
Sounds good.
That's a good thing. Me too.
I want money. Give me money. Lots of money. The only thing I guess I care about would be the Church of the BPW. Want to grow that, get interfaith conversations started, like locally, where we can have theists and atheists, specifically me, debate people and record it. And then save up money to buy affordable housing. That's what I want. So give me money, lots and lots and lots of money, please.
I gotcha. Now, once you do obtain the Church of the Best Possible World buildings that you're looking to purchase, what would be your next goal?
I would hire a advertising company to promote my book that I'm releasing with Rick Matheson, or write another book promoting my morality. The goal would be to grow the morality. And yes,
Right.
yes, you get to ask questions. Red picture dude. So yeah, I'd like to grow my morality, like a church, make it an actual church, get church facilities, then host debates and interfaith conversations all the time, publish them to YouTube, get lots of affordable housing units going that can all support the different units. That would be great. Those overall would be the main goals. Then I'd like to expand out into other industries. Like I'd love to be a refinancer for loans, for like car loans, because like car loan rates are like what 5-6% unless you're doing a brand new car. Like I could just undercut that, be like, I'll give you 3% interest. I'll just pay off the 6% whatever right now, and
I'm with you.
I'll be making a profit, like a major insane profit, and just save people money at the same time.
That's a pretty awesome goal there.
Thanks. Give me money.
Right. Now, what is atheism to you? I know tons of people in the debate sphere use it in a number of ways, but to T-Jump, what is atheism?
The lack of or rejection of the existence of God. That's it.
Gotcha. Now, tell me about your family life if you'd like to. You don't have to if you don't want to.
I don't typically like human interaction much, so I don't talk to or spend time with my family ever. I don't keep very many friends. I've just always found it hard to make friends because of my autism. The only thing I really enjoy is spending time with like stunningly beautiful women. And so if I'm not with them, I'm bored out of my mind. So even if I've had some of like the greatest friends you could hope for, but I'm bored spending time with them because they're not stunningly gorgeous Instagram models. And that is the biggest challenge I have in my life, is that I don't actually enjoy anything other than being with women like that. And so finding a community or friends or like meaningful social interactions is very difficult.
I gotcha. So just got to keep shooting for the goal line there, right?
Yeah.
Now, this is one of my favorite questions of the evening, but what is your favorite dinosaur and why?
The chicken.
How come?
Because it's funny.
How so?
Because people don't think of chickens as dinosaurs, but they are.
Oh, yeah, I'm with you. Just a tiny demonstration of evolution that we eat on a daily basis.
Yes. We eat dinosaurs. They taste just like a T-Rex.
Right. Now, I know you mentioned your system of morality earlier, and it sounds like you have a book coming out soon on it. Is that correct?
Hopefully. I'm writing a book with Rick Matheson, and hopefully it will come out and publish it. That is the goal.
That's awesome. Can you tell us a little bit about your system of morality and how you would use it to make, I guess, moral decisions?
My system of morality is that morality is described as any involuntary imposition of will. And the advantage of my morality over typical versions of morality is that it labels actions that we do that are necessary, but clearly not good, as immoral actions rather than moral actions. So, like many people think putting people in prison is moral. It's good to punish those evil prisoners. I think that's the wrong way to look at it. I think we should see it as a bad thing, a necessary evil. We have to put them in prison to protect the innocent people, but that's not a good thing that we put them in prison. It's an evil thing. It's an evil in the world that shouldn't exist. If we had a better way to isolate criminals without putting them in prison and protect innocent people, we should do that rather than put people in prison. And the recognition of that fact means we should say prison is a necessary evil, making it immoral, not moral. Necessary evils can't be moral, they're evil. And I think that acknowledging that there are a lot of these necessary evils and accurately labeling them as evil is a better moral system than what we have today, where we uphold and validate evil actions as good when we should not.
Understood. So, I guess, how would you respond to the trolley problem in your worldview? So, do you want me to say it, or do you just want to respond to it?
Sure, go for it.
Yeah, so how would you respond to the trolley problem? There's a runaway trolley barreling down the railway tracks, right? It's going full speed. Ahead on the tracks, there are 5 people tied up and unable to move. The trolley is headed straight for them. You don't know what to do. You are standing some distance off in the train yard next to a lever. You're thinking, oh man, if I pull this lever, and you see, oh, so it's going to pull the other set of track, or pull the switch to the separate set of tracks, right? So you notice that there's one person on one side of the tracks, and then you have 5 on the other side of the tracks, and you have 2 and only 2 options. Do nothing, which is the first one. Do nothing, in which case a trolley will kill 5 people on the main track. Or 2, pull the lever. Diverting the trolley onto the side track will kill 1 person. What is the more ethical option?
Well, so you should pull the lever, because right now nature is about to kill 5 people, and you can divert nature and make it only kill 1 person. And so less immoral actions have taken place in the world that you pull the lever. Now, you're not immoral for pulling the lever, because you aren't to blame for the deaths of the 1 or the 5. Nature is to blame for both, the trolley in this case. And so you're mitigating the damage done by nature when you pull the lever. An immoral action is taking place either way, but it wasn't you who was immoral. It was the environment, the nature, the universe, whatever, that's immoral.
I gotcha. Now, I guess we'll move into another topic, unless you want to elaborate any more on your moral system there.
I'm sure people will ask questions about it.
Cool. Yeah, we'll get to that then. Now, I am very pointed when it comes to foundational Christianity, and I've seen some of your videos where you debate foundational Christians, and you maintain composure. You have a good conversation. You don't really get upset with them, and oftentimes they'll even hold the priests up until the end of the debate, and they'll actually talk with you prior because they respect you, right? But how do you actually feel about foundational Christianity?
I don't understand the question. Like, I see ideologies as, I don't know, a Rubik's Cube. People are just Rubik's Cubes to be solved, more or less. So I don't actually care about what they believe or why they believe it. I just see them as a Rubik's Cube. What are the patterns, and how do we solve the patterns?
I gotcha. So with foundational Christianity specifically, though, how do you feel about that ideology
Like,
as Ejah?
same thing. It's just a Rubik's Cube. I see it like from an autistic perspective. There's a Rubik's Cube, solve the Rubik's Cube. I don't actually have an opinion on it. I don't really care what they think or why.
Oh, so you see it more as a puzzle that you can try to solve.
Yep.
I gotcha. That's actually quite interesting. Cool. Now, I'd like to learn about the Church of the Best Possible World because I love what you're doing there. I know you talked about it some, but please tell us everything you'd like to tell us about it because it's a pretty awesome program that you're doing there.
So yeah, the Church of the Best Possible Worlds. I started in a secular atheist church. The goal of it is to essentially do what the church things are supposed to do, but aren't doing by providing affordable housing. It's based on my model of morality. So the goal is to get enough funding to buy an apartment building, rent it out at affordable rates permanently, and then use those to hire an advertising company to promote the church, the book, the morality. Then buy a regular church building, do regular church things with debates and conversations and meetup events and chess groups and Reiki and whatever else sounds cool, and do church stuff, but without the need of a, baby drowning God involved.
I gotcha. Like I said, I love what you're doing there. Just make it happen, man. It's awesome. Now, I guess I hope you have an opinion on this one, but how do you feel about anti-theism?
Same thing. Puzzle. Don't care.
Gotcha. Now, are you scared of anything?
Loneliness. Not being with hot blondes. Depression.
That's a pretty good fare there.
Pain. Those would be the main ones, I guess.
Gotcha. Now, I have been developing the most dumb system of counter-apologetics ever developed. And I wanted your personal opinion on it. What do you think about atheist presuppositional apologetics?
Well, I think you're doing precept wrong. Because, the point of precept is everyone has to believe something is true before the argument begins. And you start with that by saying something like, everyone begins with the revelation of the natural world or whatever. But then you go into more arguments. You don't explain the necessity of the precept or why, like most precepts do, that any alternative worldview entails contradictions and absurdities. You go into defending the evidence, the revelation itself. The revelations aren't a presupposition. Revelations are a posteriori. So I think the first step of your argument is you're leaving precept and going into evidence with the revelation thingy, when you should be saying just straight up that any worldview that doesn't presuppose naturalism is true entails a contradiction, and then just don't talk about naturalism again. Just be like, let's talk about your worldview. What are the contradictions or the silly things in it? And you'd be like, oh, hey, your God drowned babies. That's an absurdity. Your worldview is stupid. And then never talk about naturalism. And then that is the true core of precept.
So I appreciate the input there. I feel like the way I use it, I try to build more into a cumulative case argument that shows them through induction of, after an elucidation of undeniable revelations, it presents to them a sound inductive argument that is undeniable.
Well, I would agree, but induction is the opposite of precept. Induction is evidence.
That's why I said it moves into more of a cumulative case. I kind of just start with the precept, right?
So then it would probably be better to call it like atheist induction or something, because the whole point of precept is to get rid of all of the evidence. You're not supposed to use evidence. You're supposed to, you must presuppose God and nothing else.
I gotcha. I kind of like the name though. It's unique. So I don't think the name's going to change.
Sure.
But I'm with you. I'm with you. Now, what theory of knowledge do you abide by?
Theory of knowledge? My own? I wrote my own epistemology.
Can you tell us a little bit about that?
It's a form of foundationalism. It starts with the cogito, I think, before I am. The only thing you can know with absolute certainty is that you exist. You can't believe you exist and be wrong. And then from that, you can gain other knowledge. Like there's some difference between your imagination and your experience. You can imagine a unicorn, but you don't see a unicorn, so there has to be some difference between those two things. And you can start categorizing stuff that way. And from those categorizations, you can make systems of language that can describe all of the categorizations, like math and logic. And then from that, you can find patterns in the differences, like, oh, rocks fall at this rate, there's gravity. And that's how I built my worldview.
That's pretty awesome. I'm with you. That's a great start there too. That's where everyone starts. So it's seems to be true upon reflection, right?
Sure.
Now we'll go ahead and move into the AMA. We've got a handful of people in the audience. If anybody wants to talk, go ahead and say something in the chat. And this is going to be kind of clunky because the stage feature is not working properly right now. But go ahead and raise, I guess, say something in chat, and I'll mute you and unmute you. Hey, Art.
Why do you want to be president? Thank you.
Why? Was the question why?
Mm-hmm.
Why do I want?
Or what do you hope to do?
What-
Why and what do you hope to do?
So what I hope to do would be make government function more efficiently and less garbage. So I want to eliminate the filibuster, eliminate omnibus bills, make it a requirement that senators prioritize bills that would function as a benefit to people and that are popular rather than bills that are special interest bills. So you just make it illegal to do special interest bills when we have need of public interest bills. I would get rid of the lifetime terms of the Supreme Court, get rid of the Electoral College. I would essentially copy all of the political systems that have been proven to work better around the world and say, hey, this system has been proven to work better. Let's use this. And that would be a system I think we should implement for all solutions. Like, hey, they do this. It works better. Let's copy that and stop using the crap system we have. And that would be my main goal as president, was just to fix the stupid stuff in politics.
Kind of clean it up and make it more organized and try to cut anything that's unnecessary.
Sure.
And then do you have a global policy, or what do you think how America should, treat the rest of the world?
You mean a foreign policy? Like how it
Yeah,
should...
foreign policy. I don't know why I said that.
Yeah. So foreign policy, I would probably lean more Republican. I think we should probably do less foreign aid and do more things to fix stuff in America first.
Sure.
There is a good argument to be made that there is military advantages to certain elements of foreign aid, like Japan, Taiwan, Israel.
More like foreign ties, maybe.
Well, it's more like they are a bulwark against our enemies. So, if Russia wants to start a war, they're going to have to go through Ukraine.
Mm-hmm.
So we should having a foothold as Ukraine is a good place, because if Russia gets angry, they're going to destroy Ukraine first, which means we have more time to act. If China gets angry, they're going to start with Taiwan or Japan first, which means we have more time to act. And so having military bulwarks that are allied with us, that piss off the bad guys that are closer to them, is a good strategic indicator of what's going to come. And so there's lots of good military reasons to have those places as allies, to give them foreign aid. But there's some that just have no reason. Why are we giving foreign aid to all of these other places? There's just no reason. It's just political correctness reasons. Out in funding of gender studies courses. No, we are not allowed to give any federal funding to gender studies courses ever. No.
And then, one moment. Do you have anything specifically you might want to do for education in
Yes.
the younger generation?
Yes. So there are tons and tons of education systems around the world that work extremely well. America's 30th, 40th something. It's garbage. Our system is crap. So let's just copy those. Finland is the number one system. Copy them. Problem solved. There we go. We'll just do that.
Mhm. Do you think that'd be hard to put in the infrastructure like that? Do we have it?
It would be hard to bypass the political red tape. It would not be
Yeah,
hard to implement the actual systems that Finland uses. They can be done very easily.
that's for at least public schools, right?
Yep.
Or do you want to do that for private as well?
Well, private, I can't really do anything about. They're outside of the purview of the government.
Yeah.
The goal would be to do it to public schools, demonstrate how effective it is, and then private schools will then copy it because of capitalism. They'd be compelled to copy the good ones.
Mhm. Is there anything else you might want to comment on about any other topics that you think are important that you want to change?
Well, there's tons of them. Like, I think that we should copy policies that have worked extremely well, like the EITC, the Earned Income Tax Credit, had more of an impact on raising people out of poverty than literally any other policy. That's a good thing. Legalizing weed, that would be a good thing. There's tons of things I would personally like to do, but the problem is more. I mean, those are all obvious. Like, if you just had politicians that followed the data and the evidence, they would just do those things. And that's the problem, is that we need politicians who follow the data and the evidence and aren't led by partisan biases about what their party likes. Like, it should be like, you have to follow the evidence. And if your party doesn't like that, well, too bad. Your party doesn't get a say anymore. You have to follow the evidence. So, like, banning Republicans who deny climate change, it should just be like, you shouldn't be allowed to vote if you don't acknowledge science. It should not be a thing. I don't care. I don't care if we want you to have rights. Like, if you don't know science, you don't get a vote on science. Sorry.
Mhm. So I understand where you're coming from when you say that if you deny science, if you deny basic objective facts, then your vote is cut out. But I mean, do you have any other kind of voting restrictions?
Not really, no.
So what is your restriction exactly? If you're going to deny specifically just
Well, I wouldn't deny the
climate
voters. I
science?
would deny the politicians. So if a politician denies,
Oh, okay.
and so it's really like the voter can do whatever they want, but the politician wouldn't be on the ballot if they don't understand basic science. So it's definitely gonna be like a science literacy test. Here are some facts about reality. Do you acknowledge them? If no, you're off the ballot.
Okay. Well, that's all that's coming to mind right now. Do you have any kind of plan on how you might want to campaign or how you see it coming about in the future for yourself?
Well, if my Church of the Best Possible Worlds grew and made a significant positive impact in society, that would be a platform in order to launch essentially a campaign indirectly. Like, obviously, as a church, you can't do any political campaigning, but if I create an organization that helps people and does a better job of it than the government, that in and of itself is an indirect form of advertising as a way to say, this is what I would do if I was in power. And then if I decided to run independently, um, that would be a history of what my actions would look like in government to inspire people, which I could then use as evidence to say, hey, when I ran this company, the best of all possible worlds, I lowered housing costs. I gave people more opportunities. I educated them on how to build better lives, how to make money easier, how to do all these things that the government doesn't do. The education that, because I do want to do education stuff in the Church of the Best Possible Worlds too, the education I provide is significantly more effective than the standard education. And so I can just say, I've done all of the things in the past and it works. And here's what I'm going to do as in government.
Your credibility through your previous leadership, basically.
Yep.
And then, very last thing, can you just give a general synopsis of who you are
Um,
and kind of if it's relevant at all? Maybe it's not. But
I don't know. Like, how would you answer that question?
where you're from, the kind of things you believe in and where you want to see the country.
Okay, sure. I was born in Dallas, Texas. I currently live in Minnesota. I'm an atheist, secularist, naturalist. I like capitalism. Socialism is garbage. And Marxism is garbage. So I'm center left, very slightly left. I believe I wrote a model of morality and a model and an epistemology, and I believe those are the correct ways to understand what's right and wrong in the world, and the correct ways to ground knowledge. And they are unique to me, more or less. So they're not really comparable to other models. The only thing I really care about is hot blondes, super gorgeous women. So hook me up, somebody. And money. Money is a second.
I think you discerned my vote.
Oh yeah, solid.
Yeah.
I think we got a hot blonde in the chat over there, Mr. Richardson.
Well, thank you.
I do have one quick question, if that's okay.
I was just gonna say thank you, and I wish you good luck.
Thanks.
And
for coming out.
I'm fully expecting to go ahead and get the notepad out, write down our random Discord guy, so that when you're at the inauguration, you can bring me up.
Will do, for sure.
Thank you.
So Randolph, we're gonna have Leafy go, and then you can go.
Oh, it's a quick question on something T-Jump just said. I just wondered if like what his thoughts are on social programs. I'm assuming he doesn't think socialism and social programs are the same thing. That's all.
Oh, absolutely right. There's lots of social programs that have nothing to do with socialism. The vast majority of social programs are mixed economy programs. So mixed economy programs are great, where they implement both a form of capitalistic principles as well as a form of socialistic principles, but those terms don't really mean anything. Socialism is the public-owned means of production, public-owned enterprises, those kinds of things, which are fine if you choose to start them. But they don't succeed in competitive capitalistic markets because people want to start their own companies. And so in order to create a sustainable majority position of companies that are privately owned or are publicly owned by the workers, you would have to implement a law which would then disenfranchise capitalistic enterprises, which would be bad. We should not do that. And so given an equitable system where both are given opportunities, people are going to naturally pick more capitalistic enterprises. And so when I say I'm against socialism, I'm against imposing socialism over capitalistic opportunities or giving socialism an advantage that would try to make people choose that over capitalistic systems. And I think people should have the option to choose both if they so choose. But I don't think the success rate of socialistic enterprises is at a equivalent level to those of capitalistic enterprises simply by virtue of the amount people will try them. More people will try capitalistic companies than they will socialistic companies, and the amount of leadership that is required in order to start a socialistic company is significantly more. It takes more litigation, more rules, more managing. It's much more difficult and it takes much more work. And because of that, less of them are going to start, less of them are going to succeed. They take longer to start, more money, more people. And just because of that, I'm not in favor of promoting those, because if we thought about it from an evolutionary standpoint, which organism is going to succeed more? The one that reproduces faster and more often, or the one that takes a lot more energy to reproduce and goes very slowly and takes a lot more effort? Go with the fast one. The bacteria are going to win, and capitalistic companies are the bacteria. Socialistic companies are more like a higher level organism that doesn't survive as well. Bacteria win.
Thank you, T-Jump. I agree with all of that. I also like what you were saying earlier. If I was an American, I'd vote for you. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Yeah, vote for T-Jump.
Vote for T-Jump, guys.
Gorgeous blondes.
Yeah, so hey T-Jump, how are you?
All
I've
right.
been watching a lot of your content. To me, you just come off as a logical positivist with bad foreign policy. But I wanted to ask you about two things. So your debate with Daniel Hakikachu, you said that utilitarianism is not a moral theory, it's a pragmatic theory. Do you still stand by that? Like
Yes.
utilitarianism is not a moral theory?
Yes.
Right.
Because there's multiple
So-
branches of utilitarianism. Many
Right.
of them are political views, and it's a pragmatic view. It doesn't have to do with morality. It isn't really taken seriously as like an actual moral theory in most of philosophy. they prioritize other moral theories. So it's mostly a
Sure.
political theory or a pragmatic theory. It's not really a view of morality. Like a view of morality would be deontology, virtue ethics, those kinds of things.
No, I understand, but are you claiming that utilitarianism doesn't try to claim what is objectively better, or like what is objectively moral and what is objectively immoral? It doesn't make that judgment? Because as far as
Depends on
I've
the version.
read,
Most of
it
them
does
don't.
try and make that judgment.
No, it depends on the version and interpretation. Most of them don't.
Okay, fair enough. My second question was on the way you use necessary being. So I've watched a lot of your content, and typically the theist will argue that there's a necessary being, and you'll say, yeah, but it can be a quantum field or whatever, and there's no need for a god.
Sure.
So how can you think that a quantum field is necessary? Because I feel like you're not understanding what necessary means. Like necessary means can only be conceived of in one way. So a quantum field could have otherwise. Yeah, so necessary, as far as I understand it, and you can correct me if your definition is different to mine, right? But as far as I understand the term necessary to mean, it means could only have been one way. And contingent is something that otherwise could not have been. So a quantum field could have otherwise not have been in abstraction. For example, there's lots of different types of quantum fields. There's nothing innately necessary about it. So how can you therefore say that a quantum field could be the necessary being? It just feels like you're misusing that term.
Also, the term doesn't have a correct usage. The term is completely arbitrary. Theists assert God is necessary, but you can imagine God to be a billion different ways. How about he did not drown babies? That is a one way God could be. He did not drown babies. But the Christians are like, no. What? I don't. What? So focus on the argument. God drowned babies. It's in the Bible, Genesis 1:12. God drowned babies. Jesus drowned babies, Trinitarianism. But there's lots of ways you could imagine God to be. He did not drown babies. That would be a better way for God to be. Does that mean God is no longer necessary? Well, by that definition, yes, God's not necessary. And by the definition you're using, could not have been otherwise. Nothing exists could meet that definition ever. It's logically impossible because anything that could exist could have existed in a different way. And so that definition isn't coherent in philosophy. That just doesn't work. So the definition that they usually partake is something that must exist in all possible worlds. That's the more philosophical definition of a necessary being, something that must exist in all possible worlds. That is more coherent slightly, but you can imagine there are a multitude of things that could exist in all possible worlds, and there could be a variety of them. There could be like 10 things that exist in all possible worlds, and so there are 10 necessary things. I had a conversation with Rob Koons. He's one of the leading experts on this topic. He admitted this. Yes, there could be multiple necessary things that could exist in every possible world, and they would be necessary because the definition of necessary is a thing that exists in all possible worlds. So that would be the correct definition of a necessary being. There are many usages of that of what necessary means in theism, like a thing that must be outside of space-time. It must be unchanging. It must be can't have been otherwise. They use all kinds of stupid definitions that are incoherent and don't mean anything and don't work in philosophy. And so the context I'm using that definition is going to be dependent upon what my opponent means by it usually. And I'm going to change the definition to try to meet what the opponent means by it as best as I can.
Yeah, so I would disagree with the guy that you quoted that said like there could be multiple necessary beings, because I would say that my definition is actually coherent. So if you say, like, for example, something that could have otherwise not have been, you say that applies to everything. I say, no, it doesn't apply to everything. So for example, 2 + 2 = 4 is a necessary fact. Why? Because there's only one way of expressing it. It's a tautology. It's necessarily true. 2 + 2 = 4, and there's no other way you can put that, right? That's why it's necessarily true. It could not have been otherwise. That makes it necessary.
Well, that's actually false. It can actually be otherwise. There are logically possible worlds where it doesn't. It can actually.
There are unless you change the axioms of the world. Why would you do that?
So you are not educated on the many-valued logics, non-standard logics. There are ways to have maths where 1 + 1 = 7 or whatever. That's perfectly fine. Where
if you redefine what the numbers mean.
Stop talking. So there are ways to have logical statements that are both true and false at the same time in the same way. Non-standard logic, many-valued logic, quantum logic, fuzzy logic. They just use different axioms rather than the standard logics in order to build the universe, essentially. And so those are possible worlds. There are possible worlds with different logics, which can then lead to different maths, and that's perfectly fine. No, I don't think it's really relevant to your question, but so that's just not the case that there are, even when you try to think of necessary as being mathematical, that's just, again, people who using the term necessary, not understanding philosophy, because there are lots of areas of philosophy where math isn't necessary in the way that people are using the word necessary. So necessary is mostly just a term used by theists who don't understand a lot of philosophy. That's why it's rejected by the vast majority of philosophers. So if you go to like modal logic and things, the modal logic definitions of necessary and possible are the most academic definitions, and that's the one I was using about necessary is something that exists in all possible worlds. The definition you're using just isn't coherent in philosophy. It's like that doesn't even exist because it's a joke in philosophy. It's a thing that theists use.
Yeah, but it just seems to me that you're just caricaturing the theist position. So whenever a theist says something, you're just like, "Oh, that's a laughing stock." You're not actually addressing my arguments. It's
Well, so I did.
Really.
So I said that your definition of necessary, that 2 + 2 = 4, is necessary because it couldn't have been otherwise. That's just you just lack knowledge of the other non-standard logics in which it is actually possible, and because it's actually possible, like trivially possible, that definition of necessary is a joke. Because there is a counterexample that's very well known in philosophy that they can just be like, yeah, that doesn't work. Here's why. If that's the definition you're using, you just lack knowledge in philosophy.
Yeah, no. So where you're going wrong is that by changing the axioms, you're not actually changing the statement. So if you say 2 + 2 doesn't equal 4 because I changed the axioms, you're not changing what 2 + 2 = 4. You're just expressing it differently.
No, that is again you not understanding philosophy. So when you change the axioms, like one of the axioms, the typical 3 axioms are the standard logic, law of identity, law of non-contradiction, law of excluded middle. If you have a different axiom, like in many-valued logic, you're getting rid of the law of the excluded middle. It's gone. There is no more law of the excluded middle. You don't need it. Then they have like some kind of new law that they put in there that is just a completely different law. And so any case where the law of excluded middle would be some kind of a discriminator between what's going on in the universe, that's just gone. It doesn't exist. So anything that law would prevent is possible in this new logic because the new axiom allows for this new thing that isn't in the old axioms. It's not just a redefinition. The definitions here are determined by the axiom. So if you have a new axiom, there's not a definitional change here. There's literally a fundamental essence of the universe change going on. So like if you change the law of non-contradiction, I think it's paraconsistent logic, change the law of non-contradiction, gets rid of it and says things can be both true and false at the same time in the same way. There can be true contradictions, and that's one of the axioms. And so in that universe, you could say a rock cannot be a rock and not a rock at the same time in standard logic. Well, in paraconsistent logic, they're not redefining that. They're saying, yes, it can. It can literally be both a rock and not a rock at the same time. It can literally exist and not exist at the same time. So it's not a definitional thing. They're literally just changing the laws of logic, which if you want to build that into a mathematical model, you can make that into 1 + 1 = 7.
Right, but that would be incoherent, right?
No.
Because the 1 + 1, as we know it standardly, that does not equal 7. So you have to change the definition of what 1 means.
No. So like,
and what?
Try to imagine a video game where if you have one rock and you put it next to another rock, 6 other rocks just pop out or something. It's not. You haven't changed the definition.
From?
Magic land. I don't know. The point is that if you change the fundamental,
that's not an argument.
Stop. If you change the fundamental laws of reality, then you can make it such that 1 + 1 does equal 7. And using paraconsistent logic, that can make sense in paraconsistent logic, given the axioms of paraconsistent logic. So again, this isn't my interest. I don't care about these things. It's just you lack knowledge of this field in philosophy, and that's why you're using necessary in the way you're using it. So that's not something I take seriously.
Right. So I'm just defining
the definition.
Sure. So I'm just defining it the way Ibn Sina defined it. That's what he used. He called it mumkin al-wujud, which is possible existence, and necessary existence, and that's how he defined those terms. So I'm just using his definition. If you say that's no longer relevant,
so again, possible and necessary are modal logics, and the correct definitions of modal logic are the one I gave. A necessary being is one that exists in all possible worlds. So if he used the definition you're using, then he again just didn't understand philosophy, and he's a joke.
Ibn Sina's a joke?
Sure. If he's describing it the way you're describing it, yeah, he's a joke.
Okay.
100%.
Okay, sure. So, then to circle back to the beginning, will you at least like concede that then quantum field is not necessary because it doesn't exist in all possible worlds?
No, I can just say it does exist in all possible worlds. There you go. Problem solved.
No, but there's nothing necessarily about a quantum field that would make it exist in all possible worlds. You can imagine a world where it doesn't exist in all possible worlds.
No, so this is where the arbitrariness of the necessary argument comes in. So if you say God must exist in all possible worlds, I can say, no, I can imagine a world without God. I'm doing it right now. And then you're going to say, oh, no, you can't, for some insert ad hoc reason. Now, my argument with the quantum field is going to run parallel. I'm going to say, a quantum field exists in all possible worlds, and you're going to say, no, I can imagine a world without it. And then I'm going to take whatever ad hoc reason you add in of why I can't imagine a world without God, and just mirror it to make it fit the quantum field example. So necessary isn't a real property. It's made up. It's arbitrary. It doesn't exist. And so the requirement that there must be some necessary thing is also made up and arbitrary. And any property you use to try to make it seem as if God is the necessary mean and the alternatives don't work, I can just mirror that to try to show why quantum fields are the necessary being and God doesn't work.
So under your understanding, then 2 + 2 isn't a necessary fact. Is that correct?
There are no
It's just arbitrary, right?
necessary facts. Necessary facts is not an actual property. It's not arbitrary,
Right.
but it's not necessary.
No, it is arbitrary.
No.
You're saying that in this world, in our universe, there are no necessary facts.
Right, because necessary facts don't exist. They're not a thing. There's no necessary. Necessary isn't a property.
Right. Okay. Sure. Yeah. Well, that was it. I guess you're just using the different definition to me.
Sure.
Yeah. So, I mean, I'll look into your modal logic. What was the system you were talking about? 1 + 1 = 7.
Paraconsistent logic.
Right. And is that form of logic, is that internally consistent?
Yes.
Okay. I'll look into it then.
All right, so we've got Chad Neoplatonist up next. He's been itching to pop up here for quite a while.
Yeah, hey, what's up? How you doing, T-Jump? I think in the previous conversation, you two were using necessary in a different way. So when people are using this more in cosmological arguments, think necessary in terms of unconditioned. So that means it doesn't require anything else for its existence or occurrence, as opposed to a conditioned reality that does. And so what they're arguing is that there has to be at least one unconditioned reality. I can go into that. And there has to be certain attributes of this which people stop PMing me now while I'm talking, okay? So basically,
well, so that's only one of the potential 24 different definitions of necessary.
Okay, I know, but okay, but that's the way they're using it.
No, that's the way a very small minority of theists use it. So that's not actually the way many theists use it.
Okay, well, so if someone is using it like that, understanding it like that, then basically the cosmological argument follows that there has to be at least one unconditioned reality. The unconditioned reality has to be simple, because if it had parts, it would exist dependent on its parts. It has to be unique, because if there was more than one, there would be this differentiating factor that makes one different opposed to another. That would imply composition. It also is the creator of all, in the sense that it provides the conditions for all conditioned realities' existences, and also at the same time it transcends space and time, in the sense that if it was spatio-temporal, it would be composite, it would have parts. So the idea is you have this unconditioned reality that's simple, the unique, creates everything and transcends space and time. So that's what they're getting to. But I think you need to understand that in the sense of conditioned versus unconditioned. And I think the type of modality that helps that, and Leafy, go into Aristotelian modality, Aristotelian metaphysical modality, because that will then kind of give the background to understand that concept of necessity and contingency, not in the logic here, but more in the sense of conditioned and unconditioned.
So again,
hopefully
that's
that helped.
One possible usage of the definition of the term necessary, and it's a very niche one. And all of those things, some theists use some theists don't use some of the different criteria you listed, unchanging, necessary, outside of space-time. It's all arbitrary. You can add or subtract any of those.
No, there's reasons for it.
No,
there's reasons for it.
It's arbitrary.
I could tell you the reasons.
No, I'm very familiar. I'm very familiar with those. I've debated experts in this field. They're arbitrary. They're arbitrary. You just make up a reason, say because potato. No,
they're not.
They are 100% arbitrary.
No, that's not.
No, this is not up to debate. You do not get an opinion on this. They are arbitrary.
No, they're not. Okay, I can tell you the reason why. Okay, hold on.
Stop talking.
You're wrong on this. You're wrong.
Can you mute him, please? So they are all 100% arbitrary, and the reasons asserted that you need one are completely arbitrary. They're made up. There's no logical justification for them whatsoever. And it's just like if I said a magical potato. I like magical potatoes, therefore you must have the magical potato property to be a necessary being. All of the justifications are equally as arbitrary as that. They are terrible, absolutely terrible. And you can prove this, it's very simply, by taking any of the things they require as justifications for a necessary being and actually try to make it correspond to reality. Why is this required? Why can't you have two necessary beings? Take an example. You could. Like, why would you need one? Why do you need them to be not different? Why do you need unchanging? Well, you don't. You literally don't. That's just something they want.
No. You.
Next.
Can I explain why?
No.
Can I explain
Nope.
why, T-Jump?
Nope. Because I'm
Okay.
more educated on you. than
Okay,
this.
so you don't want to deal it. You're a fucking coward.
Mute. Get him to go away.
We'll
So,
leave him muted. Yep.
next.
Yeah. So if anybody would like to chat, looks like Otangelo or the next person. This is kind of hard to manage. Anybody want to raise your hand? Go ahead and say something in the chat, and I'll pull you up.
I could ask something.
Oh, sure.
Yeah, thanks for bringing me in a little earlier there. This moment. I guess I'd like to hear a little bit more. This, there possibly being multiple things. Like when I've talked to times, they'll say this God, and I'll ask them,
Randolph is cutting it out a little bit. You're hard to hear you.
it's not me. Sorry, and I'll ask them.
Hey, Randolph, you are cutting out real bad.
I'm in my driveway. Okay, is this better? Sorry.
A little bit.
Way better.
All right. So yeah, I've talked with theists. Like they'll say they're insisting that there's only one God or one deity, and I've asked them what they have done to rule out the possible of more than one working together. Maybe they all have same capabilities. Obviously, I'm not saying they're necessarily the same, but I'm saying they have equal capabilities and they work as a team to create the universe and everything. And it sounds, T-Jump, like you were kind of elaborating a bit on this when you're saying there could be multiple beings. I'd be interested on your thoughts on this, and if you'd like to elaborate a little bit more.
Sure. So their argument is that it has to be perfectly simple. And one of the aspects of being perfectly simple is there can't be variation. If there's a way it could have been otherwise, then by their definition, it can't be necessary. Now, is this actually important? Is it required? No. You can just make up a new definition of necessary, in which case necessary is something that exists in all possible worlds. And you can have a pineapple that exists in all possible worlds, then you have a necessary pineapple. And so the argument goes into, how do you show the definition of necessary, which entails simplicity, is correct? We can hear Kin's typing. But so you'd have to show why the definition of necessary, which entails simplicity, is correspondent to reality, that there is some actual necessary property, and this actual necessary property entails simplicity rather than entailing exists in all possible worlds. And there is no such reason. It doesn't exist. It's arbitrary. This is the part where I was saying all the definitions of necessary are just 100% arbitrary, because there is no justification to why the necessary property, if it exists, would entail simplicity in the sense that they're describing of not having any variations, as opposed to having the property of exists in all possible worlds. So it doesn't make a difference. Like there's no evidential reason to select one definition over the other. And so if you define it in the all possible worlds or definition, then you can have as many necessary things as you want. Everything could be necessary. Necessitarianism can be true because all possible worlds look exactly like this one or whatever. And there's no evidential reason to indicate that that definition of necessary is any more or less correct than the definition of necessary, which entails simplicity and no deviations or no other possible ways it could have been, et cetera, et cetera.
I, as a intelligent design proponent, I don't think that this is a relevant question. I think what is relevant to make the differentiation between a designer, or you can put multiple designers, and the proposition of a non-designer. And there is the real dichotomy. Either a designer exists or it does not exist. And the question is, where does the evidence lead to?
Sure. And the evidence leads to not design, because the not design hypothesis makes novel testable predictions, which you have been shown. The design hypothesis makes no novel predictions. Therefore, the evidence by definition leads to the non-design hypothesis.
Yeah, I can make a design hypothesis, namely that instructional complex specified information comes always from an intelligent source. And this proposition or hypothesis is falsified the day that an atheist or a naturalist can demonstrate how this kind of information can arise by natural unguided means.
It's already been done, though.
No, it hasn't.
I mean, you can deny it, but all scientists, all biologists agree that's already been done. So
no, that's not true.
It is actually true. The consensus is the type of information you're talking about has already been solved.
No, it hasn't.
It has. That is the consensus among experts in the field.
Well, you can make a very easy statistical analysis and a math equation, and you will see that the odds to have even a string of 100 amino acids is 1 to 10 to the 130th power. That is in the realm of the impossible. And this is just a short string. We have an average size of 300 amino acids in a prokaryotic protein. And you need at least 1,300 proteins to have a functional cell. So if you make the calculation of this number,
Wait, stop. We don't need any of this. We did it. Like, Otangelo, I don't want the background. I don't care. Like, this has already been solved. Like, complex information can be done by natural processes, and it's done all the time. And there's tens of thousands of papers that prove this. And if you deny them, that's fine. I don't care. But if you think that's the standard, then all the naturalists who know the science be like, yeah, we've done that. Move on.
Well,
moving on.
your claim has as much value as I claiming that farting pixies made the universe.
What? I mean, like, I agree. God and farting pixies are equivalent. So saying God created the universe and farting pixies is equivalent, literally equivalent. Yes, I agree.
No, your proposition has in as much value as the one which I just made, because what you're claiming is factually wrong.
No, again, we make novel predictions, and those have been confirmed, and you've been shown.
Well, show me a science paper which has demonstrated that instructional assembly information came from non-intelligent sources.
Newscientist.com, First Life, the search for the first replicator. It lists dozens of papers, dozens of novel predictions that have been confirmed that indicate the natural selection side, which is evidence. Each one of these is evidence for the natural selection slide. Each one of these is 1 point for the abiogenesis and 0 points for intelligent design. And so until intelligent design gets up to the same amount of points of evidence, by definition, we have the evidence.
Thank you. There was no natural selection.
Okay, we can go move on to the next. I've given him this evidence many times. I don't want to go over it again. Here's the evidence. We have evidence. You don't have evidence. Therefore, by definition, evidence indicates our side. Next.
Thank you, Otangelo, for the great questions. Sorry. Does anybody else in the audience have a question? I unmuted a few of y'all.
T-Jump, thank you for answering the question before Otangelo jumped in. It was very helpful. Also, what books would you recommend people read if they're beginning?
Don't read the books. The books are awful because the books entail tons and tons and tons of useless information with a couple of really good golden nuggets deep inside there. So you're mostly wasting your time. I would look at the principles and distinctions in philosophy specifically, which are essentially just the highlights of the book. So like the a priori posteriori distinction, the manifest versus scientific image, synthetic versus analytic distinction, those kinds of distinctions that are in philosophy, rationalism versus empiricism. Looking up those distinctions specifically is a better way to learn about what philosophy is teaching and getting at, rather than reading the books, because the books contain a lot of useless paragraphs that don't do anything, useless examples that you don't need to just try to express the core ideas, which are the only things you really do need.
Thank you. I think you're saving me a lot.
Sure.
Thank you, Randolph. I guess I'll just start unmuting people because this is way harder to manage this channel than I thought this was going to be. This could not possibly go wrong. If anybody has a question, feel free to speak up. I'm slowly unmuting people.
Let's see, Jerome, what dictates the true value of proposition?
What is the true value of a proposition? What?
Yeah, what dictates the truth value of a proposition?
Corresponds to reality.
Wrong.
That is
What
actually
reality?
correct.
Which reality?
The only
Your
one.
reality?
What?
Your reality?
What does the word reality mean?
your subjective
What does the
reality?
word
'Cause
reality
in
mean?
your
What does
worldview,
the
only
word
subjectivity can exist.
what? No,
In
that's
your worldview,
that's
only
stupid.
subjectivity can exist.
Mute. That's literally the dumbest thing I've ever heard. Reality is
That's
literally.
not.
Could you mute? Yeah. So reality, by definition, is the world or state of things that actually exist, opposed to them idealistically or the notion of them being subjective state. So literally, it's the opposite of that. So reality is that which exists independent of any opinion. My worldview does not entail that only subjective reality exists. What a dumb thing to say. Like literally, that's stupid. Next.
Thank you. Yeah, I unmuted most of y'all. So if anybody has a question for T-Jump, feel free to step up to the plate.
I just want to say hi, T-Jump.
Hey, how's it going?
Pretty good. That was it. I appreciate you.
Thank you.
Do you want to address Leafy or Chad?
No.
The people that... Nope, okay.
I've done pedantic philosophical discussions with people far more educated than them. It's just be a waste of time.
Do you think that awareness or experiential states are a byproduct of evolution?
Yes.
Interesting. So there is a gene that encodes for subjectivity?
So subjectivity is an abstract term we use to describe an actual thing, and the actual thing is the direct experience. So direct experience, like the qualia, is an actually existing thing. So a gene would encode for a physical system like a brain, which can then produce qualia experience.
Jump, I had a question.
Yeah.
I noticed in your bio on your YouTube it says aspiring POTUS. Do you have any actual plans that you plan to take towards moving towards this?
Yes, we actually had that conversation earlier today in this chat. So I started a atheist church of the best possible worlds, and the goal is to provide affordable housing to make the cost of living decrease. I wrote a model of morality, and my model of morality is forcing people to do things they don't consent to doing is wrong. And so the goal of the church is to reduce the number of things that we force people to do that they don't consent to do by lowering their cost of living. And so I'm going to build the church and provide as many opportunities to people and use the church as a way to be an example of what I would do if I was in office. So then when I do run for office, I can be like, hey, look at all the stuff I've done in this previous organization that decreases the cost of living, improves education by copying the education system in Finland or whatever, that decreases the cost of healthcare by copying the healthcare systems in Singapore. And so I can copy the successful economic systems of other countries that we know work because they literally are just being done over the seas, and implement those as essentially a capitalist system or nonprofit system here in America. And then once I run for president, if I run for president, then I will just be able to point and say, hey, here's the things I've done. They're very successful. And this is what I would do if I was in office.
You would have my vote.
Thank you. Why don't we all just move to Finland? It's a good question. Can we do that? If I could just snap my fingers and move to Finland, that would be pretty cool. But it costs money, unfortunately.
That would be pretty cool. I think Dan had a question.
No, not even a little bit.
Oh, my bad, because you were talking about the suppression. Cool. If anybody is not unmuted, please just ping me and I'll get you unmuted.
Yeah, can you unmute Chad?
No.
Since there's a bit of a lull in the conversation, I had a question on how to deal with a particular argument that's very common among Christians, say like Darth Dawkins types, wherever they say there is no such thing as an agnostic, because reality itself, the material world, is evidence enough for the existence of God.
So there's multiple parts to that definition. So in Darth Dawkins' worldview, the only logically consistent way is believing in God. So if you have a worldview that is agnostic, where you don't know, then by his definition, your worldview is incoherent. It entails a logical contradiction. Therefore, it can't exist. And so the only options are belief in God or belief in no God, P or not P. Because if you have any worldview that is not a God-based worldview, it entails a logical contradiction. And so it wouldn't make a difference if you believed in a magical pineapple or a round square, or just that it was, you didn't know. All of those things would be a logical contradiction, and from Darth Dawkins' worldview, equivalent. Now, from other humans who are not stupid, they would say, no, my worldview doesn't entail an ontology. From his perspective, that looks like a contradiction, so he's going to say you're just in the non-God worldview or whatever. But that's just because he's stupid.
Have you ever debated Darth Dawkins, and do you plan on doing so?
Yes, I've debated him 4 times, and they are on my channel. There are recordings of them on my YouTube channel. YouTube.com/tjump. And I think they're the most viewed videos on both of them.
Does anybody else need unmuted? Cool. Now, if anybody has any questions for T-Jump, feel free to join in. It's an open floor.
T-Jump, would you cry if Joe Biden died?
Nope, I am not a Joe Biden fan.
Conversely to being not being a Biden fan, would you say you're a Trump fan?
No, I am less of a Trump fan than I am a Biden fan, but I think they're both terrible. If I had to pick one of the political candidates over the past like 30 years, probably be like Andrew Yang or something. Ugh. I don't think he's good, but he at least wasn't as bad as the other ones.
He was more of like a good businessman than a president.
Yes, and that's why I think he would have been a decent president, because most of what the president does is managing economic policies. Like Barack Obama, I think, was a very good president because he's very intelligent and a very good businessman. He had a choice of 2 different things he wanted to regulate, healthcare versus banking, and he chose to try to regulate healthcare, which I think was a mistake. It was too big of a problem that he couldn't solve. But he had the correct intelligence and qualifications and focus to be able to make the correct decisions a president should be able to make. He just focused on the wrong thing. He should have been focusing on banking regulation instead of healthcare regulation.
President T-Jump.
Which country do you think has the best banking regulation that should be copied?
I'm not sure. I haven't researched much into banking regulation specifically, but I know that there's a lot of countries that have pretty rigorous bank regulations that are not bad at all. I think the biggest issue is more like stock market regulation. And there's most countries just do a better job than America, because America just keeps getting rid of regulations all the time, which is terrible, which leads to a lot of the crises that we have and the bubbles that we have. So just keeping bank regulation like most regular Western nations would just be an improvement overall.
And for anyone else that is an open floor, I think everyone is unmuted.
Can you just kick the people spamming profanities? It does not help.
Do you think that cryptocurrencies should be
Should be what? Cryptocurrency should be what?
factored into the investment regulations?
No, I think cryptocurrencies are what's it called? There's a word for it where like there's a stock that doesn't have any actual value, but it's extremely like Truth Social. The value of Truth Social is completely dependent upon the people buying into it, but there's no actual value to the company. I forget.
Fiat.
It's
Is
like,
that what you're looking for?
It's not fiat.
Fiat.
So it's fiat currency, but there's a term in stocks where there is a stock that is publicly traded that has no actual value, but people keep buying it for no reason just because it's popular, and it's like gig stock or fake stock. I forget what it is, but essentially that's what I think most cryptocurrencies are. They're just gig stocks, and it's fine if people want to buy into them. I don't think it's a problem. I don't think there's any reason to regulate them any more than the other stocks. I think the biggest thing that should be regulated in terms of stocks is banning stock buybacks. Like most Western nations ban stock buybacks from companies. America doesn't though. And that's dumb. That's so dumb. Like a company gets, say, $30 billion in profit in a year. And instead of spending that profit on improving their products or paying their workers or buying buildings or improving any aspect of actual things, they spend the money on buying their own stocks back from their investors to jack up the stock price. There is no economic value to that whatsoever. It provides nothing.
Were you looking for speculative or bubble?
No, speculative and bubble are both different things, but there's an actual term for it. If you look up like the Truth Social and stock market magazines, they'll actually refer to the Truth Social stock as whatever this is.
I want to know this word.
Me too.
What do you think about this argument for God jump? It goes, 1, change is a real feature of the world. 2, but change is the actualization of potential. 3, so the actualization of potential is a real feature of the world. No potential can be actualized unless something already actualizes it. 4, so any change is caused by something already actual. 5, the occurrence of any change C presupposes something or substance S which changes. 6, the existence of S at any given moment itself presupposes the concurrent actualization of S's potential for existence. 7, so any substance S has at any moment some actualizer A of its existence. 8, A's own existence at the moment it actualizes S itself presupposes either A, the concurrent actualization of its own potential for existence, or B, A's being purely actual. 9.
So we can skip.
That's not the end of the question.
I don't need to hear it. Actual and
9. If A's existence at the moment it actualizes S presupposes.
Mute. So I don't need to. I can just skip to in any given argument, there's a set of primitives like nouns that are used to express some thing that exists. Actual and potential are such nouns, and they don't actually exist. There is no such thing as potential. There is no such thing as actual. Those are made up terms by theists to abstractly refer to actually existing things. Unless you could actually demonstrate that there is a real property, which was the potential property or the actual property, and instead of arbitrarily or abstractly referring to real actually existing things like entropy or energy or heat death or something, then the argument doesn't hold any value, because it's the ambiguity of the term being able to refer to essentially just anything doesn't actually correspond to anything in reality that we could then leverage to gain understanding about reality. So you would need to limit the primitives to actually existing properties. You could say heat requires change, or energy requires change, or time requires change, or something, and then try to infer something about that. But you couldn't then go to this abstract concept of actualization or potentialization. That's just garbage. That doesn't mean anything. You can only use actually existing properties that we know exist in physics. And if you change the argument to only entail actually existing properties, it doesn't lead to God. It just leads to quantum fields, essentially.
Sorry, all this is addressed in the second part of the argument. That's why it's like important to let people finish their questions. So
nope, not interested. Not
9,
interested.
if A's existence at the moment.
So I've heard better versions of this argument from people who are more qualified, and my answer covers all versions of this argument, every single one, without exception. Until you can demonstrate actual and potential are real existing properties, the argument is defeated on its face. Next.
Next.
Would you let Joe Biden?
I think it was a good decision to kick him out. He does not seem like a serious question person.
On the replay, they'll have to decide if I was fast enough.
I think you were, because I'm pretty sure his next sentence was going to have something to do with a sexual reference to Joe Biden doing something. That was most likely a very perfect time.
Did anybody else have any questions for our guest T-Jump today?
Sure, I'll go for it. How are you doing, T-Jump?
I'm okay. How are you?
I'm doing good. I find your moral model to be very interesting. It's one of the best that I've ever come across.
Thanks.
I think it's pretty coherent and is actually usable. And so I often, when debating morality, tend to use the involuntary imposition of will. And usually when I argue morality, I often have people ask me what's the grounding for it. I usually just tell them normative ethics. Do you think that's sufficient? How would you answer that?
Well, I think normative ethics is just a synonym of morality. So if you're asking how is morality founded and you say normative ethics, that would just be like saying, well, how is morality founded? Well, it's just morality. It doesn't really give an answer. So when they're asking how is morality founded, you need to give an ontological answer, like an ontological thing to which morality corresponds. I like quantum fields. I think it's a force of physics like any other. Just hasn't been discovered yet. Problem solved. That would be a grounding of morality. Then they're going to ask questions about how. You don't need to answer that. Like, I don't know. Who knows? Could be lots of ways. Who knows? There's lots of other ways to answer, like an a priori abstract, like math or whatever. It's just some fundamental truth of reality that's necessarily true, to use the precept. Or you could say it's a Platonic abstract, like any other Platonic object, and that could ground it. So, because if they think God grounds morality, if they're a Christian from the Christian worldview, then that means that there is some existing thing to which morality can correspond. And you can just replace that with a different existing thing to which morality can correspond. Platonic objects, a priori abstracts, law of physics, who cares? And you get the same thing. So as long as you give an ontological object to which morality can correspond, that is the best way to answer what grounds morality.
All right, thank you.
Yep.
Oh yeah, can I ask a question, T-Jump?
Sure. Go for it.
Yeah, I just wanted to know, because I've heard you make the claim that God does not exist, and I was just wondering if you had like an argument that actually establishes the conclusion that God does not exist.
Sure. There are many things in our imagination. Most of the things in our imagination are things that do not exist. If there is no evidence for such a thing, any of given objects, then it is likely to conclude it as one of the things that does not exist. God is such a thing that has no evidence and isn't a part of our imagination. Therefore, it's rational to conclude God does not exist.
Is the conclusion it's rational to conclude that God does not exist, or is the conclusion that God does not exist?
I can frame it either way. It wouldn't make a difference to the argument. So I could say anything we imagine most likely does not exist, or the vast majority of the things that we imagine don't actually exist. If something has no evidence and we imagine it, it likely does not exist. God is such a thing, therefore God likely does not exist.
Yeah, why would I grant P1?
Which one? The premise that most things we imagine don't exist?
Yeah.
Leprechauns, fairies, gods, spirits.
Well, you can like list like random examples.
Sure.
I'm asking like why would I like buy into the claim that you made? P1.
Because there's lots of examples of P1.
Yeah, but there's also lots of counterexamples. Road, cars, like that illusion.
You're breaking up.
Like an argument. Oh, wait, can you hear me?
Yep. Go
Sorry,
ahead.
can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you now. Yep.
Yeah, so I said that there's like lots of counterexamples also. I'm just wondering what leads to the conclusion for P1? Like, do you have an argument, like a set of premises that lead to that conclusion?
I could, but it's just not that important to the argument because the argument entails two things: one, that it's imaginary; two, that it has no evidence. So all of those things that you listed have evidence. So I'm totally fine with granting that they exist and would be reasonable. And so it wouldn't really make a difference. I could make it a probabilistic induction case that if things are imaginary and they have no evidence, then it's rational to believe they don't exist or whatever. In which case, that's fine. So I can just grant.
Okay, so you could are you just saying that P1 isn't relevant unless you put it in conjunction with there not being evidence in the other case?
Yeah,
So
you
it
could.
has to be in a conjunction.
Yeah, I would probably. Sure, I'm fine with that.
Okay. Now the question just becomes, what do you mean by evidence for God?
Something that can indicate the truth of the proposition, to indicate that it isn't a figment of our imagination. So, like for my case, it's going to be novel testable predictions. If you can make novel testable predictions, that's evidence it exists.
Okay. Is that like a necessary condition for proving God or having evidence for God?
In my worldview, it would be for sure.
Okay. So a novel testable prediction is necessary to be evidence for God.
For pretty much anything in my worldview, yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not sure that there's a novel testable prediction to prove God, but I don't take that to be like a necessary condition for evidence.
Well, there's a lot of them. So, like, if you die and go to heaven, that's a novel testable prediction, and if it was true, that would be evidence of God.
Yeah, I agree with that, but obviously you wouldn't be able to like there would be no credence added because you know, how would you be able to prove that you went to heaven when you're not alive, right?
Well, you don't need to prove it. It just needs to be some kind of like similar to what you would imagine to be given the description of the Bible or whatever. So it wouldn't be 100% proof, but you don't need 100% proof. You just need evidence. That would be evidence.
Yeah, I agree. I just don't take that to be like a necessary condition for evidence.
Oh, sure.
I just take like things that would be expected under that hypothesis to be evidence, and then that would just make P1 false.
Oh, yeah, sure. If there was evidence of God, then it would be rational to believe. Sure, 100%. I agree. I just think there is no evidence of God. So saying that your definition of evidence, something that you would expect to be true given the hypothesis or something along those lines, I would only count that as evidence if it was expected to be true. Like, it wasn't already known to be true. So, like, if you know something's true, say you know the sun is going to rise tomorrow, and you say, given my hypothesis, there is the spaghetti monster, and the spaghetti monster is going to make the sun rise every day. That's expected under the spaghetti monster hypothesis. Well, the spaghetti monster hypothesis was designed to fit the evidence we already have. It's ad hoc. And so that wouldn't be evidence. So you can create a hypothesis under which what you would expect to see is what you've already seen in the past a bunch of times. And that isn't evidence because that's post hoc. For it to be evidence, you'd have to expect something we haven't seen yet. Like, that's the novel testable prediction part. So I would partially agree with you, but you would have to add the caveat that you can't post hoc add in things we already know and say this is expected under my hypothesis, because it's ad hoc. It doesn't mean anything. I could take any hypothesis I want. Magic leprechauns created the universe, and they created it to have F equals ma be describing big objects, or general relativity describing all the fundamental objects. And hey, oh my God, look, it's exactly what we would expect under the magic leprechaun hypothesis. Would that be evidence? No, it wouldn't, because I post hoc clearly created the hypothesis to fit the evidence, not vice versa. Whereas if I said 6,000 years ago, magical leprechauns created the universe and gave a description of general relativity, that would be evidence. That would be very good, because it was expected that this would be the case under the hypothesis of the leprechauns prior to us already knowing it. That would be great evidence. Would you disagree with that?
No, but I have to go. Thank you.
Yep.
I believe everybody's unmuted, so if anyone else wants to pop in, feel free to ask a question.
BVS, how do you test for heaven? Well, there are several ways to do that, actually. Non-productive, but you can do it.
Do we have any more pressing questions for T-Jump?
I bench press 225 for reps.
I have a question.
Sure.
Yes. It's my first time hearing of you, so I don't know a lot about your, I guess, what you stand for. But like, my question is, what is your thought on the purpose of human existence?
The problems of human
Like,
existence?
why do we think we exist? Is it just to live, repopulate, and then die?
I
Is there more to it than that?
don't think there is a why. I think it's a how. So how we exist is through biology and physics. There isn't a why. I think morality exists as a description of what we should do in our lives or how we should try to make the world moral for human life. But I don't think there's a why humans live. I think that the answer to the question, what a moral universe would look like, would be the best of all possible worlds that I give in my model of morality, which is a world where it's impossible to force anyone to do anything they don't consent to doing, either from another person or from nature. So nature can't force you to do what you don't consent to doing. People can't force you to do what you don't consent to doing. And so everyone is essentially free from being forced to do anything they don't consent to doing. And that's a perfectly moral universe. And if you want a why or a purpose for humanity, it's to try to get to that, to make the universe into that world.
You're not a dualist, are you?
No. Materialist, hardcore.
So then you're a hardcore materialist.
Yep.
It's physics all the way down.
Yep.
Where do you have free will?
We don't. There is no free will. Free will is incoherent. But you have will. Well, so just to clarify, there is a version of free will called compatibilism. Compatibilism is the view that determinism and free will are compatible. So things can be determined, but you still have free will. I think it's just redefining free will. And so typically when theists say free will, they mean libertarian free will. Libertarian free will is incoherent. We don't have that, but we do have will. We don't need free will to have will.
That's kind of silly. I mean, like anyone who believes in libertarian free will is silly. I think
I
most.
agree.
I don't want to speak for people, but most theists that I've talked to, they're some form of compatibilist as well.
What?
So what is this will you speak of?
Well, so compatibilism would be perfectly fine, consistent with the will. So your brain operating in a way it would without any kind of external forces, that would be defined as compatibilist free will. That's fine. That would fit my definition of will perfectly. But yeah, most theists do not use compatibilism. They overtly reject compatibilism. So I have no idea what you're talking about there.
Then again, I haven't talked to all theists, but most theists I've talked to are compatibilists.
You think most theists would be okay with the idea that you're determined and you have no way to do otherwise, and it's just your brain physically determined, and that's fine?
Wait, so you're not okay? What is this will? You have to define first,
So
because
compatibilism is the view that
sense.
determinism.
I know what compatibilism is, right?
Okay.
But you have some like idiosyncratic definition for will. It seems
No.
like. So what do you mean by will?
No, will is just like your intentions and desires, more or less.
And what determines those?
Your brain.
So there's no free will.
Okay, so what is compatibilism?
Compatibilism is that you can have free will and determinism
So
without any
if
logical.
your desires are determined by your brain, that means
Yeah, that they're determined. You don't have a will.
okay, so let's go back to the first step. Compatibilism is the fact that you can be determined and still have free will, right?
Yeah, I don't have a problem with the definition of compatibilism. I'm saying
part two. Your brain determines your values. That's
yeah, you have a will, sure, but it's not free.
okay. So I think you contradicted yourself there. So option A, compatibilism is true. Compatibilism is that your brain determines your values, and determinism is compatible with free will, therefore you have free will. Option B, your brain determines your values, and there is no free will. You can't have both of those things. Those things are contradictory. So either compatibilism is true and you have free will and desires, which are determined by your brain, and that's totally compatible with me just calling that will, because I think the word free there is stupid. Or the second thing you said, if your brain determines your values, you have no free will, in which case the definition of free will you're using is the libertarian kind, which doesn't exist.
I think this just goes back to your assumptions you make about reality.
What?
Of course, I mean you're a materialist.
No,
and somehow you're a compatibilist.
Okay, so compatibilism.
No, I feel like compatibilism would work only if you have any knowledge of, I guess, if you were given a choice or if you know any other way out. Let's say you were born as a example being like as a slave, and you don't know any other way of life, and you've never learned any other way of life, and all you've known is just being a slave. Then how can you choose to be otherwise than to be a slave? So
in compatibilism, that's still free will. So free will, again, in compatibilism, free will means you can be determined, like you're a slave and that's all you've known, and still have free will. So compatibilism means you are completely 100% determined.
If you don't know
what?
If you have no other choice, though, like you wouldn't know what other life there would be besides being a slave. So like how could you choose otherwise?
So the definition of free will and compatibilism is your brain acting as it would without external constraint, more or less. So as long as your brain is functioning normally, you have free will. Doesn't matter if it's determined by you being a slave or whatever. Doesn't make a difference.
Wait, I don't get it.
That is fair because I think it's stupid. I think it's stupid usage of words. It's just determinism. Compatibilism is just determinism. 100% determinism. That's it. It's just pure determinism. Your brain, your values, your choices are all determined, and we're going to call it free. That's all it is. I think it's very stupid, but it's the consensus.
Then why are you a compatibilist?
I'm not. I think it's stupid. That's why I just call it will and not free will. But there's no incompatibility with my definition of will and the compatibilist definition of free will. So if you're okay with compatibilism, I'm just going to call that will and not call it free will because I think it's stupid to call it free will.
So you define will as the ability to act according to one's desires,
more
intentions, reasoning faculties.
Sure. Yep.
Without external constraints.
Yep. More or less.
The brain is an external constraint, but okay.
Well, no, the brain is you, so that would be internal. That wouldn't be external.
The brain isn't internal. It's spatially extended. It's external.
So it is. Your will is also spatial. So it's spatial. It doesn't mean external. External would be outside of the things that constitute your qualia experience, which would be your brain is internal. Your body is.
Yeah, and let's go back to that because earlier I asked you a question similar to this. I asked you if qualia is, or more precisely, if subjectivity is some byproduct of evolution. You said subjectivity is some abstract thing. By the way, and then you substituted that with qualia. They're the same thing. Qualia is defined as an instance of a subjective experience. So yeah, sure, all words are abstractions. That's not the point, right? So, what genes? It goes back to the question I asked before.
Subjectivity isn't a thing. Subjectivity is a class of thing. Qualia is a thing. So qualia is a particular example of sense experience. Subjectivity is a class of things which are defined as sense experience or subjective experiences. So qualia is a subjective experience. Subjectivity is a class of subjective experiences. So the qualia is an actually existing physical thing. It physically exists. Qualia experience physically exists. Subjective experience physically exists. Subjectivity is an abstract word we use to describe those things.
So you think that the brain is identical with subjectivity or subjective qualia?
There's a part of the brain which is identical with qualia. So it's called identitarianism.
Okay. So qualia is spatially extended as well. So love is something that we can weigh and measure.
No, love is again an abstract that refers to a class of existing things. So love is like the word.
No. Love is a qualia.
Stop. Love is a word that we describe a lot of different qualia. So there's lots of examples of experience of love. Each experience of love physically exists. Love as an abstract concept does not exist. It's an abstract concept. But that abstract concept refers to a lot of actual physical instances of feelings of love which do exist and are physical.
That's not the point, right? The point is that subjective experience occurs, and it doesn't matter what word or abstraction we label it with. The fact of the matter is that there is a subjective experience. Love is just a description of one of those, is an instance of a subjective. Let me give you a simpler one. Redness, okay? Does redness have spatial extension? Can I hold redness in my hand?
And an experience of redness does, yes. So
Answer
you
the
can take
follow-up.
an experience of redness, put it into a collection of neurons, put it into a petri dish, and yes, you can hold that in your hand, 100%.
Oh, what is it? What does you do under? Okay, so redness has spatial
No, again,
extension
redness is an
and position in
abstract that
space.
refers to a lots of individual instances of experiencing red. The experience of red is physical. The abstract concept of redness is not.
No, what's physical, right? If I'm looking at a red apple, what's physical is the EM field, the electromagnetic a
No,
wave
no,
from the
no,
EM
like
field hitting the apple, right?
no.
Reflecting in and
No,
hitting my
you can
eye,
have
and then
experiences
like
of
all these
redness with none of
electrical
that stuff.
impulses.
You can generate experiences of redness without any
But then
EM
that would
field.
be imaginary. You'd be
Yes,
imagining
but
it.
you could still experience redness while it's being imaginary. I can imagine a red apple right now, and I'm not seeing anything. The experience of
Right,
redness,
but that red apple isn't real, right?
which doesn't change the fact the experience of redness is real. The experience of redness is a physical thing that physically exists in your brain.
So does the apple also exist in your brain
If
when
it's
you're imagining it?
imaginary, then there is an
When you're imagining
imaginary
an apple,
apple.
there is a physical apple in your brain.
There is a physical imaginary apple in your brain. So there's a physical representation of apples in your brain.
So God is real because I imagined it.
There
He's
is a
physically real because I'm
imaginary
imagining it in my
God
brain.
in your brain. Yes, physical imaginary God.
How can an imagination be physical?
Because it's a part of your brain, and imaginations are neurons, and so they're physical. Imaginary things are physical neurons. Yes.
No. But an imagination of a red apple is not identical to an actual red apple.
Correct.
Even if
It's a neuron. It's a
so,
neuron in your brain. That's what's real.
but
An imaginary
but
red apple
this
is
is
a collection of neurons.
time out. If I see a red
Next.
apple
Let's
out
move on
there,
to the next because I don't want to go
hold
over
on.
this again. I've already
If I
answered
see
the
a
question sufficiently like 6 times. The things you imagine do create a physical thing in your brain, which is called a representation of the real thing. The real thing doesn't exist. So, like if I imagine a unicorn, unicorns don't exist, but the idea of a unicorn does exist in my brain as neurons. That does exist. So, the idea of a unicorn exists. The unicorn does not. Next.
So, our blonde bombshell next to me had a question. Randolph, of course, is who I'm talking about. He wanted to know your views on justified true belief and also Gettier cases.
So, justified true belief is a generic definition of knowledge. It's not perfectly defined because there are Gettier cases, which are cases where you can have a justified true belief, but it's not knowledge because and why it's not knowledge is debated. So, like if you see a clock that's broken, there's the statement that a broken clock will tell the right time twice a day or whatever. And so, if you wake up and you look at a broken clock, and the broken clock says it's noon, and you believe it's noon based off of this broken clock, you have a justified true belief. It's justified based off of the clock. It's true and it's a belief, but it's not really justified because the clock is broken. You just don't know that. That's the question. Why does this not count as knowledge is an open question, hasn't been solved yet. And what would constitute real knowledge, constitute real justification is an open question. I'm perfectly fine to call Gettier cases knowledge. If you look at a clock is broken, says it's 12 o'clock, and it is 12 o'clock, you have knowledge. I'm happy to grant that. I think Gettier cases are still knowledge.
Thank you, Randolph. I did unmute a few more people in the room, so if anybody has a question for T-Jump, feel free to jump in. How much longer do you want to hang out here?
10, 15 minutes, I guess.
Perfect. Glucose asked to be unmuted, but I can't find him in the audience.
One more question. Sorry.
Sure.
What's your view on toxic masculinity? Do you think masculinity is inherently toxic, or is it just a political fluff fest?
There are parts that are inherently toxic. So, like, masculinity as a term describes a lot of traits that are coincidentally a part of male biology. So, many masculine traits are traits that have been a result of evolution. And evolution is selected for these traits because they're beneficial. And many of them are terrible, like violence. Why are most people in prison young men? Because of testosterone, because of evolution, because of violence, because of conflict resolution. Those are masculine traits. They are masculinity. And they are toxic. And evolution designed them that way because they were very good at making the species continue. And so, yes, there are a lot of toxic masculine behaviors that are a result of evolution, and that's where I think the major difference.
Would you consider it as sorry to
Go ahead,
interrupt you.
no problem.
Would you consider violence as toxic then if it
Yes.
if it has helped society, I guess, develop to where now?
Yes. So another thing that's helped society develop is rape. Rape does progress the society. Like when the Norse would take wives by capturing them from other civilizations and bringing them back and raping them, that was a thing that helped the society grow. Was that toxic? Yes, that was very toxic. And so toxic in this case is essentially a synonym of immoral. And there can be many immoral things that help society to grow. Killing your enemies can help your society to grow. So, like, if there's two pygmy tribes and they're fighting over resources and you just kill all of the other tribe, there's no one to compete for resources. Your tribe is going to grow. Is that beneficial for your evolutionary reproduction? Absolutely. Is it toxic? Yes, absolutely. And so the fact that something is beneficial does not make it moral or good. And toxic is essentially a synonym of immoral or not good.
Okay, so can it be something you can fix then if it's if society views it as toxic? Can we like let me rephrase this.
Well, sure. There's lots of ways to fix it. Like if we could implant computer chips in our brains to get rid of all of our evolutionary tendencies and just make us logic machines, essentially, that would fix it. I don't think it's reasonable or rational, but there are definitely ways to fix it. I think that the best ways to fix it are to provide all of the necessary resources for each individual to be happy in life, more or less, and that will fix it. Because most of the conflicts and things are a result of the lack of resources. Like poverty generates crime. If you don't have as much money, you are more likely to be a criminal. If you don't have as much opportunities, you're more likely to be a criminal. And so if we create more opportunities, that will decrease the rate of criminality and will limit the toxic behavior. Also, education. People become more educated. They have more control over their evolutionary tendencies. So improving education, especially like teaching people morality, like my morality, would also help improve the negative or get rid of some of the negative toxic behaviors. And there are toxic women behaviors as well. Was it femininity? Toxic femininity? Definitely a thing.
Okay, here's a run-out question then. Should we fix toxic masculinity? Do you think it would benefit society as a whole?
I think there's two ways I interpret that question. One is the obvious way, which is like, clearly, if we could solve all the problems with machines, AIs, and we no longer needed men to be violent, yeah, absolutely. There are cases where masculinity is beneficial, like in the evolutionary cases. And so by getting rid of those, if we got rid of all the masculine, negative masculine, toxic masculinity things 3,000 years ago, it would destroy society. People wouldn't be able to survive. The reason they were selected for was that they had given evolutionary advantage. So if we got rid of them, we wouldn't have an evolutionary advantage. So that would be bad. But if we could artificially substitute the societal needs that are fulfilled by the toxic masculinity with like AIs or technology, then we would no longer have any benefit of toxic masculinity. And so, yes, it would absolutely be beneficial to get rid of it. And the question would be: is today, in our current society, does toxic masculine behavior still provide the evolutionary advantages that it did in the past? I don't know the answer to that question. I would guess probably not, or probably to a much less degree. So it probably isn't as required, and we probably would be better off without it. In most cases, I don't know everything that a feminist would classify as toxic masculinity. Most of it, a lot of it's probably not. A lot of it's probably fine. But there are certain cases like overt violence and rape. Those things we could definitely be better without.
Thank you. That was it.
Would anybody else like to jump in?
Yeah, I had a quick question. It's been a while since I heard you talk. Are you still like endorsing some kind of moral naturalism? And why do you reject like non-naturalistic explanations of morality?
Well, for two reasons. One, I'm a naturalist, so I don't think there are any non-natural anythings. Second reason is because I think that the argumentation works better for a naturalist hypothesis than it does a non-naturalist hypothesis.
So what do you make of like arguments to the effect that, well, moral properties, you don't need to do necessarily like empirical investigation, right? They're things you can sort of just discover through like conceptual analysis of like what an action is in a certain context. And that's how like you figure out what's right and wrong. In those cases, like it's not a matter of like doing natural science to figure out what is right and wrong. It's a matter of like philosophical reflection.
Sure, but we can do philosophical reflection to discover lots of physical things too. Like we do physical, like Einstein imagining that he was falling from an elevator at the speed of light, or traveling on a train at the speed of light. That's philosophical investigation, which led him to general and special relativity. So the fact that we do philosophical investigation in order to learn things doesn't mean that the things we are learning about aren't physical. And so I wouldn't consider the methodology of learning about a thing as indicative of the ontology of the thing itself. I think that would be confusing epistemology and ontology.
So like the way I understand like naturalism is specifically in terms of like the epistemology, right? So like natural properties are those that are discovered through the natural sciences and like empirical investigation. But like the idea with respect to like non-naturalism is like, well, you don't even have to like engage in empirical investigation. It's totally true, yeah, that like you can have philosophical reflection and that can help you discover things about like the empirical world. But at the end of the day, you still have to like do the empirical investigation with respect to like measuring whether the light curves around the moon and stuff with respect to the eclipse in order to discover whether like your conceptual analysis is indeed like the correct model for reality.
Oh, I would agree. I would say that we should have to do the same thing for morality. So we can get many different conceptual analyses of morality. And in order to establish which one is right, we still need to do that physical verification. And I think without that, it's just the exact same as scientists building hypotheses without testing them. Even if they're about the physical world, it makes no difference. So I think that in order to establish which more model of morality is correct, you need to go from that conceptual analysis to make predictions about the physical world, like it's a law or some a priori abstract or something, or there's some consequence in the physical world if this principle is true or something. I still think you're going to need that in order to vindicate one model over the other.
Yeah, I can sort of see that perspective. I'm not convinced that you like need to do the same kind of empirical investigation. I mean, like I can think about, I don't know, like worlds that don't like actually exist, right? And maybe there's like creatures that are similar to us, and they could like do rational reflection and that sort of thing. And like the idea of them having morality would just like follow from them being engaged in like setting down principles of action and that sort of thing. So it wouldn't require like the world in terms of its physics, especially to be a certain way. It just like float free from the physical substrate, and it's more about like the function of how like certain creatures interact with one another.
Sure, and I think that would be great evidence for your hypothesis. So, like, if we discovered another planet or another alien species or something, and their methodology for establishing moral truths happened to be internal reflection or something, that would follow or indicate your hypothesis.
Okay, yeah. I do think like you can probably find out moral truths through empirical analysis. But I think the point there is that you don't need to do empirical investigation. Like you can find out a priori truths through certain weird paths of empirical investigation. You don't necessarily like sometimes empirical investigation can give you a priori information. So like it isn't necessarily the case that just because you found it out through empirical investigation that the thing is not a priori.
Absolutely. So it's always the case that your means of discovering something does not tell you the ontology of the thing you're discovering. That's the confusion of epistemology and ontology. So it's never the case that because we discover it through the material method, it must be material. Totally false. This is a mistake theists make all the time where they say, oh, but if you can't investigate the supernatural through physical means, like, well, yes, you can. Sure, you can. If I like pray to God and he heals my limb, that's great evidence of the supernatural. It doesn't matter if the consequences are physical. So there's always a distinction between epistemology and ontology. The way you learn about something doesn't necessarily tell you anything about the ontology of the thing. And so I would agree. The method of learning about something is independent of the ontology of the thing. But I think that it's more likely that morality is like an undiscovered law of physics that permeates the universe. And I think it does affect us in a way that could cause us to introspect and learn about it, just like logic or math does. But I don't think those are abstract objects. I think those are descriptions of a fundamental nature of reality that is physical.
I definitely like, of course, like the moral supervenes on the physical. But like I do think there is like a connection there between the epistemological dimension of how you discover a property, especially with respect to like a priori properties. If the only way you can discover a property is through philosophical reflection and conceptual analysis, then that would mean it was inaccessible to scientific empirical like investigation, right? And then in that case, it would not be like a natural property. It would be something like potentially agnostic about like the natural substrate.
Well, that's only partially
in that case, the
true.
ontology of the thing would be not a natural thing.
Well, there's two things there. One is that you learned about it via philosophy, but that part wouldn't matter. The second thing you said would matter, that it's inaccessible via the scientific method. That part, if you could prove that in some way, that would of course be evidence. Like if it's impossible to learn about this thing via anything in this natural world, then yeah, that would be evidence of it being some other thing. But that's a negative. You can't actually prove that. That's like saying it's impossible to count to the number 7 trillion, or it's impossible to do X, Y, and Z. The fact that you claim it's impossible is never, it's impossible to meet that burden of proof. You could never demonstrate that with any means. And so it's not a justifiable way to come to a conclusion about anything. And so I would agree that if you could do that, then yeah, that would be great evidence. Like if you just prove it's impossible for it to be discovered via science ever in any method, yeah, that'd be great evidence. But you can't do that. And so simply the virtue of you learned about it via philosophy wouldn't be sufficient to be equivocal to proving it can't be done, or to justify the statement it can't be learned about through scientific means.
I mean, like, I think it's false, maybe. Well, you think everything's like natural at the end of the day, in some sense. But like with respect to like mathematical properties, right? It doesn't seem that empirical investigation is ever going to be sufficient to prove things with respect where like it's a generalized proof about like it's infinite, right? That's never going to like empirical investigation is always going to be something that's like finite, right? And with respect to certain mathematical claims, right? The claim is going to range over like the infinity of numbers, and that there is such and such like property that holds with respect to like something about like infinity or whatnot. So it seems
Sure,
like
but that wouldn't matter.
at
So
least
like,
with math.
in order to naturally investigate something, you just need to make predictions. So if property X entails this, if I have this novel prediction that I would expect to see in this experiment, you get the results. That would be evidence of the infinite being confirmed by a natural experiment in the natural world, which happens all the time. That's literally quantum mechanics does that all the time. There's lots of infinites that make successful predictions. So you can investigate infinites with the natural world. The experiment itself doesn't need to be infinite. It just needs to make a prediction about something which is infinite.
Does it ever like like do you ever get like infinities in like
Physics,
science and
yes,
within
literally it's a thing. In quantum mechanics, quantum physics, there's so many of them. It's just permeates the top levels of physics. Like Feynman diagrams is a great example. Feynman diagrams entail like 6 or 7 infinites in order to describe the possible paths of particles where they could go. There's infinitely many ways it could travel to go from point A to point B in a geodesic, like a curved path around a circle or whatever. And the Feynman way to solve this was to calculate all of them, take all of the infinite ways it could go, and use that as a mathematical model in order to predict which ways it's going to go. And if this model is correct, it will predict where it's going to be, or something with some level of probability. And it works extremely well. The Feynman diagrams are stupid effective, and they entail infinites all the time. So yes, there are tons and tons of infinites in quantum mechanics, and they work extremely well.
Yeah, I guess there's that kind of like infinity. But then like there are also like other domains of mathematics, right? That like their purpose isn't to map onto reality at all. They're just like describing hypothetical like structures, right? That follow like that are built on certain axioms, right? And they're like totally unconnected with reality.
Right. So like I can say
they might make no predictions, right?
Right. So I
Such
could
systems might make no
F equals ma times 42. Like F equals ma times 42 does not describe anything in our world. It is a coherent mathematical model where both sides of the equal sign are equivalent. It just doesn't describe reality. And so math is a language, like English, no different than English. I could say the sky is blue. I could say the sky is purple. And English and math both share 3 types of sentences, ones that correspond to reality, ones that don't correspond to reality, and ones that are self-contradictory, like 1 + 1 = 7, or married bachelors exist or something. And so all languages can create many representations of things that exist, things that don't exist, and things that are logically contradictory, because it's a language. And so you obviously aren't going to find purple unicorns that magically fart crystals or something, but that's not required, because that sentence as a sentence is just a concept. And so there are many concepts of math that don't exist in reality, like F equals ma times 42. It just doesn't exist in reality. But that doesn't mean that that object exists in some platonic sense. It's just a language. It's just a language that has lots of different ways we can combine the words in a lot of ways that don't correspond to reality.
Well, like it's not that it like requires existence in like a Platonic sense. Like you could have like a more sort of agnostic view about like exactly how it exists, as opposed to like something existing out there in like Plato's heaven. That's almost like theism, and it's problematic for like the same reasons. But like I forget what I was gonna say.
So my argument is more, why would you consider math anything more than a language like English? Like literally, first sentence, Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy, math and logic are formal languages that contain a system of semantics and something, something. It's literally just a language. That's what the consensus is. Why would you ever consider it more than that?
I guess like I could just like say it's a language, but that would like the statements there are still like I'm going to claim that they're going to be true, but they're not true through like empirical investigation.
So you can say like they're internally consistent, in which case they're true in that sense, but they wouldn't be true in the sense they correspond to reality, which is fine. And so you could say the sentence, the sky is blue or a bachelor is an unmarried man. You can say that's true given English, but there's nothing in reality that corresponds to that. So it's not something that's true abstractly in like a platonic sense or in a reality sense. It's just a thing we've made up in our language. So it's true given our language that humans have made up. And in that sense, math is true. Like F equals ma times 42 is true given our system of math, because the two sides of the equal sign are equivalent or whatever, but it doesn't correspond to reality. There's nothing in reality where F equals ma times 42. It just doesn't exist. And so you can say it's true in our minds, in our imagination, given the rules that we've made up. But you couldn't say it's true that it corresponds to some true fact in reality. That part you couldn't say.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that. I just maybe we have different theories of like what true means. Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, that's probably what it is. Like I think things can be true in virtue of like the language game, so to speak. Doesn't necessarily require correspondence to reality. It's a different sense of it being true.
Sure, I would agree. And I would just classify that subset of truth as just being conceptual in human imagination. It's true in virtue of human imagination, but that fully stops with a physical brain state. And there's nothing further in ontology that it could correspond to.
Yeah. I think we were kind of circling around again. I just like posit maybe the existence of things that or like creatures that are very unlike us, that have very different like physical substrate. So yeah, thanks for answering the question.
Yep.
The various questions actually.
Yep. Anytime.
Do you want to take any more questions?
Seems good to me. I'm ready to head out, start getting ready for bed. You got work at 5 a.m.
I totally appreciate you coming and doing an AMA with us. It was awesome having you here as always. But everybody listening, make sure you follow TJUP on every platform. Make sure you check out the Church of the Best Possible Worlds. You want to plug some stuff?
YouTube or pornhub.com/tjump.
No, don't link to. Don't do that. Okay, I guess that's the final words.
Yeah, sure. YouTube.com/tjump. Patreon.com/tjump. Give me money, please. Church of the Best Possible Worlds. Because if I can buy an apartment building, I can change politics. That'd be great. Let's change the world. Give me money.
President TJump and his adult thing that he's doing. Thank you, sir.
Yep.